Olivia Gambelin, what an absolute honor and a pleasure to have you here for the Happy Smart City podcast. Arguably one of the most accomplished and thriving young professionals in the fourth industrial revolution, by anyone's standards. It's going to be an absolute treat as we try and navigate what it means to operate within the fourth industrial revolution and this hyper-connected world that we have today. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Tieho. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, I certainly am too. So I'm going to start with your first question, which is, could you give us some perspective on your journey thus far and what your vision is for artificial intelligence?
Absolutely. So I grew up, which I know is a great place to start a journey, but I grew up out in the Silicon Valley. And so I saw technology when it was first coming out. So even before tech would expand out of the Silicon Valley and other places in the world would receive it, a lot of the technology is tested out on the neighborhoods surrounding San Francisco and Palo Alto, which is right by my next door to my childhood home. So I saw tech at its worst and at its best. And at its worst, it was pretty, not terrifying. It was frustrating to see of why this is a useless piece of technology or this is causing harm, or I would see the harm caused to my loved ones around me. So the beginning of my journey was founded on me continuously asking why are we creating this? Why is this supposed to be of value? Especially in light of artificial intelligence. So that eventually actually led me into studying ethics and morality, ironically. But I later on in my career saw that there was this connection between ethics and artificial intelligence, and that by bringing ethics into the conversation around artificial intelligence, that all of a sudden, all of those whys and that frustration were being answered. Instead of a piece of technology just being created, an AI just being created to be created or for productivity's sake. Instead, there was purpose behind it. Instead, there were values. And then I saw tech at its best. And so really that leads into my vision for technology is being able to incorporate our values and our purpose as humans into the technology that we're building, not replacing us as humans, not replacing our decision-making or our sense of morality with an AI algorithm, but instead looking at how can we use these AI applications and models as tools for us as humans that allows us to live a more purpose-led life or a more fulfilling and value-driven life. So really my vision for AI through all of that journey, my vision for AI has always been, how do we make good tech? How do we make tech that's at its best? And tech at its best is really a tool for humans to be their best.
Just listening to you speak, I remember I spent an evening with a gentleman out in Palo Alto, actually he and his wife and one of his former colleagues. So they were veterans at NASA. And we literally spent the whole weekend talking about ethics, technology, communications, etc. And I must say, it's always funny how, people who grow up in Palo Alto or the Silicon Valley area, for you guys, it's just about, trying to help, make technology work for people. Mm-hmm. It's not that, okay. So for people who don't come from the area, like myself, we're super hyped and super excited. And to us, it's this, glitzy, glamorous kind of field. But for you guys, it's kind of like, we see this stuff every day. How can we do it better? So it's always interesting to talk to people from the Silicon Valley area. Yeah. I'm just curious about, as a child growing up, because for me, the first time I saw the word technology or the definition, I think I was around 11 years old. And the definition was kind of like technology is a way of doing something better. But it was around, just improving stuff was technology. But obviously it had something to do with machines. That's kind of like the connotation that I had. And that's basically how, my understanding of technology, came up. when did you sort of get the sense that, there is this thing called technology, and what kind of mental model did you have of technology growing up?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess it ties again into the fact that I grew up in the valley, kind of the two big career paths that people follow. Well, out here it was, are you going to be a lawyer? Are you going to be a doctor? Or are you going to be a tech entrepreneur? And those were the three big career paths. And so
you guys had tech entrepreneur as, just a regular option. That is, wow.
Yeah. It was like, oh, okay, cool. It was taken seriously. That was a serious career path that people.
That's what you guys do there.
Yeah. So I guess technology, I'm trying to think when I would have had created a mental concept of technology. I think, I know it wasn't always there. But I guess just so early on that I can't quite pinpoint the time, because it was so embedded in the culture out here that it was just, we always had new technology. And so I had the understanding of it. And yeah. Oh, that is a great question. You have me thinking. I don't think I have a straight answer right now.
All right, so we're going to go on to the next one. Next question is, what is the difference between AI ethics and RegTech, or regulation technology?
Mm-hmm. So AI ethics and RegTech, there is a great intersection happening here now. And we're seeing actually a lot of collaboration start up between these two industries, which I'm very excited about because it's very helpful. So RegTech is focused more on compliance and governance. I have a friend that says, if you're compliant, then you're only one step above illegal. And when you phrase it that way, you're going, well, okay, maybe we should do a little bit more than just be compliant. The step above compliance, what sits on top of compliance and regulation, is ethics. And that's where you start considering the bigger picture questions of, I can do this, but should I be doing this? Is this the impact that I want to be having on the people around me? And so the nice thing is RegTech is able to build that foundation, that compliance foundation that companies need to essentially get their feet on the ground and go, okay, now we know that we have like the foundation to our house built. What's the house going to look like on top of it? And that's where AI ethics comes in. So AI ethics and RegTech actually are very complementary, and can support each other as well as these two industries grow as well.
All right. So now this next question, and I agree with you 100%. But in any case, I have to agree with you because you're the pro. but I like how sweet and short that answer was, because it's very concise and it's not confusing. Now, the most important one to me in this whole interview is, economics is obviously PPE at scale, politics, philosophy, and economics. And so to me, that suggests that when it comes to big business and these big tech applications, especially on the software side, politics and regulation go together. And so policy, would change in different political regimes. Now, how should the average citizen think about AI ethics in their use of modern applications or when sharing their data? And the reason for this question is, the average person is using all these powerful, pieces of software today and these massive databases. And some of them may not be ethical, but they may be compliant or within the confines of regulation due to different political regimes. But then, how do we even try to be ethical as individuals?
Also, again, a great question, because we hear a lot in the news as well. It's almost this sense of hopelessness from the average citizen of, well, I just have to do whatever big tech says. I mean, I have no control over things, which isn't true. We are the market. We as individual citizens are the market. So if we collectively make that decision that we want to change the rules around data sharing, we have the ability to push back. And so what I often say to individual citizens is it's our duty to go through this process of digital literacy, of being able to learn exactly where our privacy lies, how our data is shared, we don't have to know in details. It's actually not complex. If you're asking a technologist to explain how your data is being shared and they can't explain it to you in plain language, that's, I would question if they really know what they're doing as well, because it's not complex. It's very easy to explain in plain language how data is being shared. And if we can have those conversations, then the average citizen is able to look at that and go, well, I don't like that, but I do like this practice. And then we almost have, we'll say, like voting rights in terms of our buying power. So if we have the ability to understand what kind of data sharing practices we like and don't like, then if we change our buying patterns to fit the ones that we do like, that's essentially us a vote of confidence for those companies that are taking those, we'll say, privacy or ethical data sharing practices to heart. So what I say to the average citizen is, don't fall victim, we'll say, to this sense of hopelessness of we're just subject to whatever big tech says. No, we still have the voice. We still have the ability to push back. It's more on us, though, to consciously look at the technology and really ask ourselves if we want to adopt it. Companies look at adopting from third-party vendors all the time, this application, this software, so on and so forth. We as individuals also go through our own, we'll say, mini procurement processes, where we're looking at a technology and we're going, well, do I actually need this? Do I actually want this? What need is this solving for me? So instead of getting caught up in, oh, this is nice and shiny, does this piece of technology actually solve a problem I'm experiencing? And is it doing it in a way that aligns with my own values? So yes, it takes a few more minutes to sit at the store and go, do I buy this or do I not? But the long-term effects is you're actually, at the end of the day, you're living truer to yourself too. You're not just adopting in this consumerist mindset. You are adopting for solutions that for challenges that you need solved, but you're adopting by your values. So again, I know that's a longer answer, but to the average citizen, it's really just emphasizing that we do have power to decide still, and that's very important power to keep and make sure that we're not that no one tells us that we don't have.
Yeah, I like that. So what I'm sensing is kind of, what happened after the financial crisis. People had to learn a little bit more about financial literacy and learn about the different, instruments that they're investing in, to understand the risk that's inherent. And a lot of whistleblowers came out, and the average person in the street kind of got a glimpse into the level of complexity and ethics that go into investing and all these different instruments in the financial system. Now, everything to me is always about orders of complexity. Now, in this particular economy, the big data and artificial intelligence economy, I think that people sometimes lose hope, like you said, when they're faced with AI, because at the end of the day, it's a very complex sort of institution in its own right. AI is sort of an institution. So trying to navigate that institution is very difficult. Some people may not be very forthcoming, especially if they're employed by a big company. But where I do think the opportunity lies is in the data and privacy literacy, as opposed to AI literacy for the average person. I think that data literacy is really great, because if you can protect your data, which is the first step before you even apply the AI, you need data to operate on. But if people can just, sort of get a good grasp on the data literacy, then, it could be a lot of smooth sailing. So again, a very, very great answer there.
Yeah. Perfect analogy, by the way.
Well,
perfect analogy with the financial crisis in terms of that change in literacy that needed to happen.
Yeah, I think it's all about the level of mathematics and the abstractness. So if you think in a set theory, perspective, like elementary set theory, it's very easy to understand what's what, where the intersections. So I'm not going to do this because these people have access to this. But once you start thinking about the applications, that's much more of a mathematical, sort of perspective. And that's why people shouldn't bother with thinking of how options work. Just take them out of my portfolio. I don't want to know about derivatives. They're highly complex. I don't want to touch them. Same as AI. All I need to know is the different permissions that I've set on my data. Who has access to them? I don't even want to know what type of neural network you've got running there. Let's just keep my data out of it. I think that's, sort of just those mental models and the orders of complexity is what can simplify it going forward. So the next question is, how can machine learning and blockchain improve the state of AI ethics? And to what extent would such enterprise software applications be a good investment?
So I'll talk about blockchain first, since blockchain is a very interesting piece of technology. Right now, its primary use, of course, is cryptocurrency. And the interesting thing about it is it does have the ability to help, we'll say, in supply chains. It's basically, there's no way to lie. You see it laid out right in front of you. It helps with the, not necessarily transparent, but making supply chains trustworthy. So in that aspect, that would really benefit AI ethics, of having a technology that helps with that trustworthiness factor. The downside to blockchain is the energy consumption behind it. And so blockchain, I have a love-hate relationship with, where I'm fascinated by how it works, and I can see breaking its use case out of cryptocurrency and taking it beyond. I don't know to what quite yet, but I see it could be very powerful in creating more trustworthy supply chains. The part that I'm hesitant about is the environmental impact. That needs to be better investigated, we'll say. It's the amount of energy consumption behind it is massive. And so if there was a way to actually grow and build blockchain technology, but in a way that was sustainable, then that would be brilliant. That would be a brilliant investment. That's hacking the code, we'll say. So in that direction, it's a trade-off of, yes, this could be a very strong piece of technology, and not solve ethical problems, but help support ethical challenges. But the sustainability, the environmental impact, the sustainable aspect does need more attention. We can't just push forward saying, well, this will help us create more trustworthy supply chains at the negative, harmful impact to the environment. Those need to be in balance. So that's my feedback on blockchain technology. Machine learning along the same lines as well, where this is, again, very interesting technology, but we're seeing more and more reports and research about the environmental impact of such massive algorithms. And again, if we're looking at the outputs and use cases of these ML applications, and they're helpful, but it's at the cost of extreme harm to the environment, then what are we doing? It's the kind of irony of, let's build an ML model to help with environmental impact, but that model itself is causing environmental harm. So that's the part that I get stuck at quite often. And again, this is not something that's solved currently. And I know of a lot of people that are looking into how the environmental impact side, how do we improve this? And I think that is worthy of investment, that crosshair there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to agree with you 100%. In terms of data integrity and making sure that databases, have a very high level of integrity in the data, blockchain is phenomenal.
Exactly.
but that energy model is something that we have to work on. And because this is going to be something that we want to permeate, our lives at scale, permeate global society, I think we need a fundamental overhaul of our economic structures. So remote working is something that I think is very powerful, because if people don't have to travel and commute on a daily, then it means that we're not, emitting fossil fuels. And so we can sort of divert that consumption into all of these data centers. I think that for me is something that would help, not necessarily creating new pieces of technology, but rather re-architecting global society and how we do economics. I think that could be a great opportunity. But we're seeing it today with, with remote work and all of these other different warehousing models, moving away from shopping malls, etc. Right. So next question is, how can a board of directors leverage AI ethics to improve its ESG metrics?
Yes, so this one's fun. So AI ethics, so ESG, let me start from the other direction. So ESG, the hardest metric to really quantify and really be able to bring to the surface is the S, the social side. AI ethics is at its best in the S, in that social aspect. So right now, a lot of S falls towards CSR metrics, looking at philanthropic endeavors for a company, when really AI ethics, the different values and principles that we hold within AI ethics can be incorporated into that social side, that S side, and then really give the ability to understand, well, go beyond philanthropic and CSR practices and actually put a little more action behind the S. So looking at how do we make this technology more trustworthy for the society? Are we incorporating the values of the company and the society that we're based in into the product that we're making? And it's not only limited to that social side to things. AI ethics, again, has this consideration towards the environment. So with the E, what kind of sustainability practices do you have in place? A lot of sustainability either falls under or complements nicely to different aspects within AI ethics. So again, brought in there. And then governance side, as we were talking earlier, AI ethics and RegTech go hand in hand. And AI ethics and AI governance are incredibly intertwined. So the use of AI ethics in helping both set ESG metrics that you should be working for, but also giving you the tool set and the, we'll say, process to achieving those ESG metrics. It's a wonderful combination. And you were talking as well, Teaho, about needing almost like a fundamental economic overhaul out of AI ethics, or a concept that is very popular and well received it within AI ethics, is this concept of the triple bottom line, where you're looking at people, planet, and profit, and looking for a way to balance those three. And in doing so, instead of just working for the bottom line of profit, you're incorporating the people, which comes into the social side of ESG, and planet, which comes into the E, and the environmental aspect of ESG. AI ethics is, again, looking at those three core: people, planet, profit. How do we balance the impact between the three? The impact, both meaning, are the consequences equally split within the three? Are the benefits equally split between the three? Or not even equally split. At least does one of these three pillars benefit without significant harm to the other three? So if we're creating, let me back up, if we're creating an application for the planet, are people and profit either also benefiting as well, or neutral? As long as they're not significantly harmed by pursuing planet, then that's a good enough balance between those three. And they align perfectly with supporting these ESG metrics. So it's a lot in terms of conceptual support, bringing in the frameworks and protocols needed to support ESG metrics, and then also just setting what kind of metrics you want to achieve. AI ethics is incredibly helpful in, we'll say, the critical thinking that is needed behind achieving strong ESG metrics.
Well, I've never heard it said like that before, so I'm gonna have a little thinking to do myself after this one. Yeah, it's actually it's got me thinking now. Okay.
I hope in a good way.
Yeah. I mean, in a good way. It's yeah. I need to sort of yeah. Okay, so how can governments, regulators, and other strategic stakeholders achieve shareholder value from supporting AI ethics institutions like yours?
Well, let's put it this way. So in our current state of technology, if you are not incorporating ethics into your company culture, but also into your products, into your approaches, methodologies from day one, if you're not incorporating that now, you're not going to be here in 5 to 10 years. It is becoming a vital pillar to having a strong, healthy organization. And I can't stress this enough, because right now you look at it and it's like, oh, it's AI ethics. It's just ethics. Like, we don't need that. Especially about only just 3 years ago, I remember having these conversations with people where they're like, oh, it's just ethics. I don't need that. That's not vital to the success of my company. Well, most of those people that I was talking to, their company is no longer around because of the risk that comes with not using ethics in one side. So if you're not using ethics, then you're exposing yourself to multiple different really hidden risks at that point, where you're putting your reputation on the line, but you're also putting the well-being of your user base on the line if you're not incorporating ethics. But that's only one side. I argue as well that if you're not bringing ethics into the conversation, then you're missing a whole side to your technology that you'll never know, because ethics really helps in stimulating for innovation and stimulating, well, how can we make this technology even better than the current use case? What can we do beyond that? So I know this is a long-winded roundabout answer on that.
Oh, this is fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. So by governments and regulators and strategic stakeholders supporting the work that we're doing in AI ethics, what they're doing is legitimizing the importance of ethics in the long run. First of all, not that it's not legitimate yet already, but it's giving that legal precedence behind it. But it's also supporting an industry that's really going to change the face of technology and continue changing that face of technology. So the support for organizations like my own, like there's a growing number of us ethics firms out there. That support to us, when we're still in a very young industry, it's allowing us to then come back and serve the tech industry even better and change the face of the tech industry, so that the technology is not just profit driven, it's actually human centric. It's coming back towards supporting people and growing people. And again, when you have this ethical component, the company is naturally compliant. So at the same time, it's like getting a 2-for-1 deal in going through these ethical protocols and frameworks and adjustments. You're both covering your compliance, which governments and regulators will love, but you're also building stronger technology for the people that you're trying to serve.
Yeah, fantastic. And again, I mean, this really has me thinking at a very deep level and much more long term. So if you think about, the economic cycles, but most importantly, super cycles. If you think about, if someone or an area is hurt by a certain technology, or a certain policy, that policy will never survive, because once the kids from that area that were devastated, grow up, they're going to do everything in their power to, to make sure that thing never happens again. So you may be profitable for 20 to 30 years, but in the extra long term and the super cycles, 35 to 70 plus years, you're not going to have a company. And that's why I think we've never seen really, really big utility companies and so forth survive for over 80 years. Somewhere or the other, they're going to get toppled because, someone who was a child will now be in power at age 60 and they're just going to scrap it off. You know what I mean? And we've seen this, I guess, in ancient history as well. No one thought Babylon would fall, it fell. No one thought Rome would fall, but it fell. And I mean, most recently with the whole Wall Street situation, yes, they were compliant because to an extent, there's a little bit of politics baked in there. But now Silicon Valley is positioning itself as, a financier and not just some electronics, hub. But now you're seeing all these financial technologies coming from Silicon Valley. As a matter of fact, I know quite a few former Wall Street executives that are now thriving in Silicon Valley, because they're doing all these interesting spec deals, et cetera, in fintech. So yeah, I think the ethics is a massive investment, but you have to be thinking, generationally, and not just in your lifetime or just, shareholder value for people who are looking to get their returns in 10, 15, 20 years. You really have to be thinking extra long term. Yeah.
It's trying to break almost we built an entire industry on short-termism, quick turnaround, quick return. And we have to break that now. We're now at the point where we're seeing, well, this doesn't work. This isn't getting us to the end goal that we originally wanted. It has all of these massive harmful impacts along with it when we're on that hamster wheel, that quick turnaround. And so now we have to break it. We have to get out of that cycle and start looking at the long term. As you were saying, the super cycles, that's where the value over time is going to be. And that's difficult because, it's not right in front of our face always. And sometimes when you're working on something, you may not see its full return in your lifetime. So it's a very interesting point in time that we're at in terms of society as well, to have to break what is a nice feedback loop in our mind where we're like, ooh, okay, I put in the effort and I get the return right away. But instead shift to, I put in the effort because I'm working for a bigger picture here.
Yeah. And I think, if you take it another level higher above the ethics layer, the morality aspect of it, a big part of it is also driven by consumerism. And, not everyone, but the culture of success, in our modern time is, wear a diamond encrusted watch, with a $2,000 bottle of champagne. In a first generation family, that's the kind of mentality that we have in society. So people want to go from zero to hero, in their 30s. And it's that type of mentality that will, push markets to try and deliver, irrational returns. And that's why people will lobby for these ridiculous policies that we're demanding as society. We don't even know it, but the fact that you drink a $2,000 champagne bottle will force, financial institutions to say, hey, I can get you such and such returns in 6 months or 3 years. and our irrational exuberance. I think former chairman of the Fed, Alan Greenspan, termed it irrational exuberance. Just this belief that we can just keep creating these massive, massive returns, but not understanding the repercussions of it. And again, it's not just about the policy layer. It's so much about the ethics, but at the end of the day, the consumer has the power. The morality aspect of it as well is what's driving the demand for these irrational policies and market practices.
Yeah, exactly. Incredibly well put.
All right. Thank you for the 10 points there. Okay, so so we're second to last here. Where man, did I even put this question properly? Okay, yes. So where AI ethics is breached severely, how can we diagnose and control the resultant dynamical complexity? So say, for example, some ethical breach happens. How do we even flag it or even create signals to diagnose, this particular breach? And when it does happen, how do we control this exponential repercussion that results from that?
Yeah. So right now, our main mode of detection for AI ethics breaches are usually actually whistleblowers within companies, which, because it's such a new industry, is really where it's going to start, where you have the internal people internal to organizations coming out and saying, well, this isn't right. Or you have the news breaks of, well, look at these demographics, or look at these numbers and stats that came out of the decision of this company. So right now it's much more a reactionary diagnosis of breaches. However, I don't know if it's for good or for bad, because there's so many of these, we see them in the news all the time. We do have a growing body of research that a lot of organizations, including my own, were building models off of to be able to predict and easily diagnose and even predict, in some cases, AI ethics breaches by looking at, well, does the company actually employ an ethicist? Does the company have an ethics board? If it's missing one of those two components, well, then it's much more likely for them to actually have an AI ethics breach, solely because they don't have anyone with their mind on these issues or these challenges. That's a very simple example, actually, of something that we look for when we go to work with a client. Is what have you done in the past? What do you have going on now? And that's an easy way to diagnose the potential of coming across an AI ethics challenge and having that breach of ethics, as you phrase it. It's a lot of the diagnosis is going to be less of, we'll say less of this exact instance is going to happen, and more of how ready are you, how equipped are you to take on the challenges as they come? Because AI ethics challenges happen daily. They happen daily, monthly, on large and small scales. Sometimes they're happening without you, if you're not consciously evaluating, without you even realizing. And so the diagnoses methods that the AI ethics industry is creating is much more focused on how ready, how equipped are you, your organization, your employees, your team, to take on these challenges and think through them as they happen in real time. So with that all being said, as that's shifting towards the readiness, we're shifting away from the reactive, retroactive breaches. So, something bad happened, and now we're reacting to it. There's a breach in AI ethics, and now we're reacting to it. By looking more and more at, well, how ready is a company to take on these challenges as they come? We're shifting into a more proactive model where it's, okay, we know these are coming. We know that we're going to be faced with these decisions for certain. What are we doing so that we are strong enough to take it on? That we have the critical thinking abilities, we have the processes we have in place, we have the culture in place to take on these decisions as they come our way and make stronger decisions, so that we're not in the reactive state where we have the resulting chaos that we're dealing with. So it's unfortunate that a lot of these proactive models are built off of such a massive database of breaches. But the one good thing of all of these breaches coming is we're able to build and create these models and this research to better equip companies and better predict when breaches will happen.
I think this one is perhaps the most complex sort of market and industry to get right in terms of breaches and market failure. If you think about, again, the concept of value at risk, in finance, when you invest or build, models for profitability, you need to look at, if I invest X amount, whether it's in the organization or, externally, what are we going to get? There's that concept of value at risk. But then in environmental analyses as well, you had the value, you do have value at risk, and it's sort of picked up recently after the oil spill in South America. And different people, because, different countries view different ecosystems differently, simply because of their own economic models of their different countries, right? Certain ecosystems don't matter as much to certain countries. But there's that issue of value at risk, environmental value at risk, and different, economists priced the environmental damage different. Some priced it in the trillions, some in the hundreds of billions. And it's kind of easy to see, even though the valuations are different environmentally, depending on who's looking, it's kind of easy to quantify. And we can reach some type of middle ground there. But I think in the AI perspective, when there's a major breach, it's kind of difficult because it's a lot more difficult, much more complex, because it goes into metaphysics and the issue of qualia. So, if a company activated a certain algorithm that was highly toxic to society, again, going back to the ESG dashboard now, society is again, massive metric. Say some algorithm impacts children, right? In a very, very impressive way, just really changes how they see the world. How do you quantify that? You know what I mean? Because children aren't necessarily, plugged to the internet. It's not like we can say, oh, okay, so this child now values sports shoes than they do vegetables. You know what I mean? And the repercussions of hurting a whole generation that deeply and that fundamentally, that to me is what makes it, the most complex sort of endeavor of our time, because how do you do it?
Yeah. And it's difficult because a lot of, the metrics that indicate strong ethics or weak ethics, they're not necessarily quantifiable. They're more qualitative at times. And that's a lot harder, considering we're in the context of AI, to get our minds around at times, because AI is all about quantifying, not necessarily qualifying. And they're hard to pinpoint exactly the repercussions. We see them in retrospect, but in creating these applications, it's much harder to go, well, these are going to be the repercussions. And I do stress often this concept of moral reflection. This is coming out of moral philosophy, actually. But moral reflection is very creatively named, but it's this concept of you make a decision and you see the outcome, and then it's almost like its own algorithm, its own ML algorithm. You see the outcome and you adjust your decision based off of that outcome. So in the case of you make a decision and children start to favor candy over vegetables or something like that, and you see, well, that's not the outcome I wanted. What happened? Oh, well, it's based off of this decision. I'm going to go update that decision. Or next time I come across that decision, I have an updated indicator or factors that I'm considering.
It's almost like a chess. It's almost like a chess algorithm that comes up with strategies based on previous games, which again we saw in AlphaGo. Yeah, but then AlphaGo 0 doesn't learn from past. Anyway, yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's it's stressing that importance of moral reflection as we grow, because we won't necessarily always be able to predict the outcomes of our decisions in terms of the ethical impact. We will see the outcomes, and the importance there is not preventing the outcomes necessarily, but it's what we do after. Do we actually learn and grow, or do we just keep making that same decision over and over again and not progress?
Wow. Well, again, I think it's all about scale and structure, because what would seem like learning and improving right now is heavily dependent on the core structure. But if you rearrange the core and then different components of a system change in the level of their importance, you know what I mean? And so what was correct today, or rather correct yesterday, may not be correct tomorrow, because there's been a fundamental change in the core structure. That's something that I think will make society highly complex and continuously complex, and we may not reach an ultimate state of balance and perfection, simply because the core is unstable due to politics, I guess.
Yeah. And that can, in one way, be very, very discouraging of, we're never going to reach perfection, as you say. We have this unstable core. It can be discouraging, but at the same time, I think it's also something quite beautiful. It gives us something that we're working together towards as a human race. It gives us purpose. It gives us that drive forward. If we view that as a wall, then we'll never move past it. But if we view it as something that we need to work towards together, then that can actually be a great unifier. Even if we never achieve perfection, it's still a unifier in our lives, bringing us together towards working for a common end goal, a common purpose.
Well, lovely little game of musical chairs nonetheless.
Exactly.
So the last question is perhaps the magnum opus of our podcast. So how can local governments create happier and more fulfilling cities?
So I love to actually draw attention to something that is not at all technology-based in these kind of answers. And it's actually the slow food movement in Italy. The whole concept of slow food it was founded in response to fast food, if the name didn't indicate. But the whole purpose of fast food is you're expediting the turnaround between I want food, I have food, I've eaten, done, shortening that time. The slow food concept is actually completely opposite. Slow food is all about locally sourcing ingredients from local farmers, from the community around, bringing those together in a common around the table, quite literally bringing all these local resources around the table together, and then spending time together, having that investment in the community, in the communal side of just sharing the meal. And it's all about, you locally source these ingredients, you take the time, you put in the care into cooking the meal, and then you take the time to sit and talk to the person across the table from you. And it's not about how fast you can eat the meal. It's about how in depth can you have that conversation over a shared meal. And the sentiment behind slow food, I think, is something that is beautiful, very, very beautiful, and should be incorporated beyond just food into how we're building our cities and our local communities, where, yes, it's nice that the world is so connected, that we're able to have this conversation. Tieho, for example, we are who knows how many miles apart. We're able to come together and have this conversation over, thanks to a piece of technology, but also turning back towards, well, what can we do to support the person right next to us? With this ability to connect with people overseas, we don't want to lose sight of the person that's sitting across the table from us, our neighbor. And so building happier cities, yes, having technology that helps improve infrastructure and helps improve standard of living, that's fantastic. But it's okay to do it on a small scale. It's okay to do it where it's just your town or just your city or just your country. And it's not pitting you against another town or country. It's bringing together and supporting the one that you have at your onus. And then that allows you to be a better neighbor, a better neighboring town that you can support the other town. It's focusing on the people at the end of the day, and the, again, technology being used as a tool to help improve the standard of living within your local community. But how can you do that with locally sourced as well, kind of with locally sourced technology? Can you support companies that exist within your immediate ecosystem instead of ones across the world? Can you invest into your own community first and foremost before looking for overseas investments? It's just looking at home, and it's not going hyper patriotic. It's just going, can I take care of my neighbor and help take care of my neighbor as well as myself? Because if my neighbor's taking care of my neighbor, will also take care of me. And that camaraderie that's built there, and that sense of community that's built there, then allows for a stronger community and a stronger ability to support a global ecosystem as well. I will end there in the concept of, how do we create happier cities? Well, it's how do we come together around the same table, share a meal, and be able to listen to each other's perspectives and support each other through just being human.
So it kind of sounds like reimagining town halls, maybe.
Yeah.
That could be it. All right, Olivia, this has been a very, very great interview, and thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you so much, Diego. I loved your lens and your perspective on AI ethics by bringing in to the conversation the financial and economic components. I found that really fascinating.